Fantastic. So, welcome back to the keynote stage, everybody. My name is Matthew Butters. I'm a director at Pascal Watson Architects. I'm also chair of the British Aviation Group. You've joined us for a discussion, a bit of a fireside chat with Paul from Connected Places Catapult and Wendy from Transport for West Midlands. And they're going to talk about transport as the key to people-centric, accessible and sustainable urban spaces. So, if I can hand over to Wendy first to introduce yourself.
I've never been called Wendy before.
Oh, Anne.
So, but I don't know Peter Pan either, but we'll carry on, don't worry.
Sorry, Anne.
Yeah, so for those that don't know me, obviously, I'm Anne Shaw. I'm the Executive Director for Transport for West Midlands, and I look after both operational side of transport alongside our policy strategy and also some of the big delivery projects that we have ongoing in the West Midlands as well. And then I'll leave you to introduce yourself, Paul.
Thank you, Wendy. And
I'm never going to live in stand.
so I'm Paul Wilson. I'm the Chief Business Officer from the Connected Places Catapult. And we're a catapult that's focused on transport and the built environment. And we're an innovation agency working with all sorts of different parts of Britain. So this conversation that we're about to have about is transport the key enabler to people-centric, accessible and sustainable urban spaces is exactly in our bailiwick. Because we bring together the thinking around place-based economy and all of the connectivity that goes into that. So that's a mixture of both transport and digital connectivity as well, but today we're going to major on transport. And I almost want to leave it hanging in the air of saying, what is a connected place might be most easily defined by what's an unconnected place. An unconnected place is a sad and lonely place, where not very much happens. But a connected place, in all of its connectivity, is a place which has probably got a lot of energy, a lot of economy, a lot of culture, a lot of social inclusion. So these are all the positive sides of connected places. And our public leaders and businesses are doing well when they think about all of the facets of a connected place, be it the university, the hospital, the housing, and of course the transport systems, which is what we're going to be talking about most. And Anne here has the most amazing story from the West Midlands about the need for that connectivity. So let me hand you back to Anne. Yep. What goes on in the West Midlands like this?
Well, quite a lot. We've got nearly 3 million residents that live in the West Midlands that need to travel around. They need to get to school. They need to get to work as well. So I actually part of a wider authority called the West Midlands Combined Authority. So when we're thinking about transport and what are the transport solutions that we need, both in terms of the services, the operational side to it, as well as the investment in our new infrastructure and maintaining the existing infrastructure. It is about how do we connect those people to make sure that they can get the best education, the best job, etc. And that's really important for the economy of our local region and its success and the outcomes that we want to see as part of a combined authority as well. So we've got something like a third of our population. They don't drive a car, they haven't got access to a car. So public transport is really important for those people. And if I say to you that obviously maps and correlates with where we've got higher levels of deprivation as well, and then about 80% of those third of our population, they're also from our ethnic minorities. So we have a very diverse a set of people that live and work in the West Midlands as well. So really important for us from a connectivity point of view that we are providing transport that connects everybody through some great choices in public transport. Of course, there is still a role for private transport as part of that as well. So just some thoughts from yourself in terms of the catapult and what you think the catapult can sort of think about in that space and how you support the likes of us in terms of trying to make these places better.
I think that stat you gave, a third of people don't have access to a car, is an amazing fact, something for us to keep thinking about. One of the things we've been doing is using transport hubs as hubs of innovation. So that might be a railway station, an airport, a port, a service station on a motorway, what happens in those places is an intensity of innovation. It might be around electrification of transport. It might be around using digital twins. It might be around safety for women and girls accessing those places. All of these things are innovative uses. Something like 14 million people in Britain have a disability, and those people are less likely to want to use public transport. So those transport hubs, enabling them to be accessible to the widest number of people, is again a focus of our innovation. And I happen to know that you are doing some of this at the University of Birmingham train station, aren't you?
Yes, so we've just reopened a new part of the university station. So a project that's just been delivered through the height of COVID, with many interruptions as part of that. Really important that this station serve the community and the cluster that has grown up. So the university itself is a sort of big space, lots of students and lots of research that goes on there. Next to our sort of regional hospital, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital as well as the Women's Hospital. And then we have a cluster of all of that medical research in that location as well. So it's really grown and grown. I think the station first opened in 1978. And it was built for quite a few less passengers than that go through there at the moment. So a station with 2 just platforms has more passengers through it than crew. So if you think of the size of Crewe Station and how we were cramming people in. So the station itself was built on a site which had an ancient monument. So we had to really factor that in. And then also, how do we connect the university and the hospital through the public realm? Bus interchange, railway station, and then also next to one of our mainline canals as well, which was difficult to access through into the station. We've now got seamless access, so again, it's more accessible for people who have mobility issues. You can get straight off the canal into the station as well, so you can walk through some more pleasant environment as part of that. The public realm is really connecting the university and the hospital and the research side of it, but it's also a great place for people who are working in that location. A much bigger station. We've probably overspecced it now because we anticipate the growth. And we're seeing many millions of passengers through that station a year. Fantastic way in which we use transport infrastructure to change and transform places that people work in and make it more accessible for people to get to those jobs as well.
You've also done something similar at Curzon Street with housing as well?
Curzon Street, obviously, HS2. I know some parts of it being cancelled, which we won't talk about today. But in Birmingham, we're still seeing quite a lot of development. We had for HS2 a transport connectivity package, and its integration with our bus network, with Moore Street Station, which is already there, and also we're extending and building our tram network. So the HS2 connectivity package was to create this sort of 45-minute across the region once you arrive in Birmingham, 45 minutes to get to anywhere else in the region through good transport connectivity. But that's not the only thing that we've done as well. So through our construction and design, we've sort of transformed some of the places. So we've been able to do that through our tram extension in terms of how we've improved the public realm, pedestrian accessibility and safety for road users, connecting into the wider public transport. And of course, it's opened up quite a lot of development space as well. So HS2 have just published a report, I think it's Trains to Cranes, and it sort of gives you some really high value numbers about how much housing is being created in that location, in a city environment. We've got a housing shortage, so we need to make sure that we're fulfilling those, and then connecting it into other spaces that are being created. We've got BBC taking up occupation there, for example. MasterChef is coming to Birmingham. So things like that are being generated in that location, all stimulated by the public transport, the HS2, the connectivity from the sort of more localised transport, and then transforming that space through the bigger master plan, looking at the sort of wider regeneration opportunities.
It's a giant project, isn't it?
Huge.
Giant project.
Yeah.
What's the amount of new housing in this project?
I actually wrote it down because I knew you were going to ask me that question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
I think it's something like 41,000 homes has been created on the back of HS2. So not all of those will be around Curzon, of course, because there's also the interchange station in Solihull. So that's a 484% increase in new homes as a consequence of stimulating the investment from the private sector in housing.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, those kind of things, so they're the things that we're dealing with. And of course, within the catapult space, we know that there is also a future need to look differently at how we provide transport as well. I'm just wondering how
You're
we
going to
can...
get me talking about
Yeah.
the eVTOLs, aren't you?
Yeah.
Let me tell you about I want to tell you
Go on.
about Bristol
Oh, yes.
first.
Yes, oh yes.
Because we're working with Bristol Temple Meads, and I'm going to give a 1-minute history lesson. Back in the day, there was a fella, he was called Brunel, and he was into multimodal transport. So he wanted to take people from London direct to America via Bristol, where he happened to have a boat called the SS Great Britain. So he wanted to build a train station from Paddington to his boat, and off you got on his boat off to the New World. But the city fathers of Bristol didn't like trains. They thought they were noisy, they looked dangerous, they were smelly, and so they stopped him from building his station a mile short of where the boat was, which is like the ultimate lack of multimodal transport thinking. And so since then, since 1840, Bristol Temple Meads has been about a mile away from where it really should have been, on the edge of town. But over the time, the economy of Bristol has grown out to now touch all around the train station. And now the most huge urban redevelopment is happening around the train station. The University of Bristol's opening a new campus, about $500 million going on that. A brand new conferencing centre going on that. Large amounts, I think 10,000 student housing, and then an innovation area in the middle of the area where a fairly low quality, single-story, asbestos-ridden industrial area is being changed into an innovation zone in the middle of Bristol with lots of housing coming. So this is, the anchor tenant there is Bristol Temple Meads train station. It's obviously a very beautiful building, but it's been kind of divorced from the rest of what's been going on in the city until now. And now that is changing its whole way of thinking of itself as becoming the place, because it's the most beautiful place in that part of town. So they're looking at increasing our market, looking at entertainment venues with music and culture, and a whole kind of reinvention of this transport hub. So I think as transport becomes a place, it also uses lots of digital technology, and it's using all sorts of decarbonisation techniques that have not been introduced before. Mm-hmm. So this kind of use of transport hubs becomes a really innovative space. And now that takes me to the future you were getting me to think about, which is we have been talking about using the station as a vertiport. So this is a place where eVTOLs can take off about 300 meters high, the propellers turn, go along up in the sky, and come down probably within about a 30 to 50 mile radius. It's an electric helicopter. But if those of you who are in the scene say that, well, I get told off if you call it electric helicopter. It's an eVTOL. So that will have a transformational impact, I believe, within a decade for most of our city centres. And Coventry was actually Britain's first eVTOL site. I don't know if you want to tell us about that.
You probably know more about that than I do, to be honest. I know that we had a heliport in Coventry, and obviously trialling autonomous drone kind of stuff, and looking at how that could be used for deliveries and other things like that as well. How would it fit into a city, and what would it be contributing in terms of the transport solutions as well? So I think my job is to look at what we're doing now and sort of planning alongside my housing and regeneration, etc. But people like you are helping me look to the future as well in terms of what would be the future solutions as part of our transport system.
If you're skeptical of that this will happen, go and have a look at Vertical Aerospace on your phone now. That's a little company, which is no longer so little, in Bristol, that's making a vertical takeoff taxi and has an order book of 1,200 for its units, and making it a unicorn company worth over £1 billion. Virgin, American Airlines, others have already put in hundreds of orders to buy the eVTOLs. The most valuable route in Britain being from Canary Wharf to Heathrow. but there are actually many other routes. You could be going from Wolverhampton to Birmingham, Coventry to Wolverhampton, and I think this will be happening within this decade, largely because it will be happening in China, and it will be happening in the Middle East. And people from here will visit there and go, well, why aren't we doing it? And that will cause it to come about probably within, I would say, within the decade.
Yeah, I guess the thing that we just need to be careful of is how does that sort of make sure that we still have an equitable transport system,
that's a great
and how
question.
is that going to be used by everybody as well?
I think you just touched there on 2 points I wanted to make to you. So Paul, what you describe is not just 10 years in the future, but it is happening in other cities now. And for those of you that are not involved in the world of eVTOL, there are companies in this room here who are actively working on the rollout of it elsewhere. And Vertical are a fantastic example of a UK innovative company who happens to be based in Bristol with a strong aeronautical heritage, who are helping to blaze the way to the future there. And I think it's for us to make sure that we capitalise on that as much as we can. We don't get left behind by the rest of the world. But then Anne's point's very good, which is what does that mean for everybody else involved in the public transport network? And you spoke about Curzon Street. You spoke about the intensity of development that comes through the rail development that you have there. But how do you ensure that the rest of your public transportation network is activated? What are the key enablers to, as well as getting people coming in on the main line, but also coming from your outer line regions in to benefit from that?
So this comes with transport people working with regeneration and housing teams and working collaboratively across the private investment side of that stuff as well. So having a master plan that makes sure that you're connecting people with the places that they're going to live or the places that they're going to work, with the transport system that then enables that sort of growth in a sustainable way as well. It also takes a bit of brave leadership, so local politicians have had to change Birmingham's landscape, particularly away from a car-centric city, and I've been involved in some of those changes over the last, too many years to mention really, in terms of taking some of the main roads out of the city of Birmingham city centre and making sure that the city is more walkable, active travel, cycling, e-scooters and so on as well. But then really making sure that the connectivity to HS2 wasn't just around that cluster. I mentioned it earlier, that sort of 45-minute ambition to the whole of the West Midlands to be able to connect. So when people arrive in Birmingham, they can actually go to other places in the West Midlands. It's just not focused in Birmingham city centre as well. So it enables that more sustainable growth as part of it, and not just housing, but also commercial development and creating jobs, inward investment, which is still pretty active in Birmingham.
Yeah. Just out of interest, on that subject, how many urban centres have you got within the West Midlands region?
Oh, there's over 30 urban centres. Obviously, Birmingham city centre is the biggest.
Network.
Coventry city centre, Wolverhampton city centre, and then we've got some bigger towns around the region as well, which are still economic centres. And then we've still also got this sort of clusters of economy, so where employment happens as well in some of those clusters.
Fantastic. And before we came on stage, Paul, we were talking about the sheer size of the site that exists in Bristol, right in the centre of the city, which has really not been developed significantly at all for the historical reasons you were talking about. The numbers of people that could be accommodated there to live, as well as to study and to work, is very large. To what extent will that be an extension of the existing urban neighbourhoods in the city, and to what extent will there be people coming in?
Yeah, well, it's a fantastic brown site, ripe for industrial and housing development, and they claim. I'm sure everyone claims this, so I don't want to. Not sure I want to stand by the claim. It's the largest urban innovation area in Europe. I'm sure everyone's got one of those. So, but anyway, it's very big, and the number of housing that will go there is at least 10,000 units. Is the number of housing? Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it's a terrific opportunity for the city, both to accommodate new people, to deal with an existing housing crisis, which we know is acute, particularly for student accommodation in Bristol, and also look at how that might meet some of the existing neighbourhoods around the
With
site?
very little car parking available, which has been a hallmark of a lot of house development in the centre of Bristol, which is a lot to do with promoting active travel and micromobility and mobility as a service.
Okay. Now, I've got one question to ask you both before we wrap up, but I would also like to give the audience an opportunity to ask any questions. So if anybody has anything that they would like to ask either Anne or Paul about Bristol, about the West Midlands, now's your time. If you haven't got, and do please stick your hand up. Paul's here with a roving microphone. If you haven't got a question now, that's fine. I'll ask my question, and if something occurs to you, we'll just come back to the audience to check if anybody else wants to ask anything before we wrap up. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you each my additional question, starting with you, Paul. In the work that you've been doing over the last couple of years, if you had one ask of the city to make your connected place a better connected place, what would it be?
It would be to do with digital twins. And the whole of planning using digital is a game changer in terms of the intelligence with which it can be done. And what we see at transport hubs and in some cities, Sunderland being a great example, is the use of digital twins to accelerate planning with intelligence. So you can run what-if scenarios, you can run all sorts of future planning methods as a result of that. And one of the projects we're working on is with the Department for Transport on a digital twin of Britain's transport system across all modes. I think it's a key enabler to accelerating the connection between transport and place.
Oh, okay, fantastic, interesting. And I bet people are asking you all the time, Anne, of what you can do for them, but what would you ask for the people of the West Midlands to help make your job better?
There's probably two things, if I can be greedy. Is that okay? So the first one is about sustainable funding. All public transport requires a level of subsidy. It's really important to be seen as an investment rather than a bottom cost line as well. So the ability for us to encourage through better sustainable funding for public transport and keeping services running at the frequency and reliability that people want. That would connect everybody to all of those opportunities, and it will help improve the economy. The other side to it is to bring transport professionals alongside housing professionals, alongside regeneration, alongside economy professionals, because we need to do this together. To create great places requires integrated thinking, integrated planning, master planning, and then integrated delivery as well, to make sure that we have all the key opportunities, the funding that we have got to sort of through private investment or government grants comes together to make sure that we can deliver more with what we have.
Now, there's an interesting thought. Thank you very much. So I'll just quickly cast an eye over the audience. If anybody has a question for Anne or Paul, please put your hand up now. Otherwise, we've moved quite conveniently to 29 minutes past the hour, and I'd ask you to give a round of applause for our guests here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.